It's all right. Hello. Good afternoon. My name is Χαράλαμπος Τσαρδανίδης. I'm the director of the Institute of International Economic Relations. And on behalf of the Federation of the European Unions for the Union of European Federations, I will welcome you for the speech of Jamar, who is a friend, and he is one of the most important persons who knows both Greece and the European Union. Allow me to present Jamar, but before that, with the Federalist movement, the Institute has cooperated almost about on the forthcoming European elections, and we have organized 3 events. 2 of them were about the experience of the 4 years, the last 4 years of the developments in the European Union, and the second one was about the prospects of the European Union, where candidates of the European Parliament participated. This is our 3rd event, and we are very proud of that. Allow me now to present Jamar. Jamar has 1 wife and 4 mistresses. The 4 mistresses is, first of all, Folegandros. You know that he spent his vacations and a lot of time, Easter, in Folegandros, and he loves this island very much. The second mistress is Greece, and we all know how hard efforts with his efforts is possible to raise money for a lot of people, and especially for students hitting schools in the northern Greece, among other things. The third mistress, let's say, is writing. And the fourth, of course, is European integration. And this is why we asked him to present his ideas during these difficult times of Europe about the European integration. Jamar studied law at the University of Louvain and European law at the College of Europe in Greece, followed by international law and international relations and the Graduate Institute of International Studies in Geneva and the School of Advanced International Studies of the Johns Hopkins University in Washington, D.C. Worked as assistant to the rector, then as Dean of Studies at the College of Europe in Greece. He joined the European Commission in 1987, where he worked successively in the departments responsible for small and medium-sized enterprises, education, training and youth, research and innovation, employment and social affairs, communication, as well as the Commission's spokesman service. In 2011, he was appointed head of the European Commission's representation in the Netherlands, then in Belgium, until his retirement in 2019. Since 2019, he has been working on a voluntary basis for Europa Nostra, the leading organization in Europe dealing with cultural heritage. And he's a member of the Nostra Council and director of its office in Brussels. In 2024, he has been appointed as Nostra's executive vice president. Jimmy has written 7 books during the past years on European affairs and Jean Monnet. His book on Greece, letters to Byron and 14 portraits of Hellenians have been translated in Greece. I think that some of them you have written in Folegandros, if I am not wrong. Jimmy has also a long-standing relationship with Greece. In addition to his books, he founded in 2011 a non-profit organization entitled 12 Hours for Greece, which aims at collecting funds to help associations in Greece dealing with education, health, and the fight against poverty. He has been appointed for his actions by the President of the Hellenic Republic as Gold Cross Officer of the Order of Honor. And it is our honor to have you here at the Institute of International Economic Relations. Jimmy Jamar, the floor is yours for the next 45 to 50 minutes.
Thank you, Χαράλαμπε, and thank you for these kind words. Thank you for inviting me also here today. I'm very honored and moved to be with you this evening. I'd like also to thank Daphne Gogo and the European Federalist Movement here in Greece, but also from what I heard in Europe, because this conference is we have a streaming, I think, with throughout Europe. So I'm very happy about that, and I salute our colleagues and our friends in the different European countries. We're going to talk about Europe, and it's important to talk about Europe. It's not always easy to talk about Europe, and during the past days and weeks in several European countries, I see every time how difficult it is to raise the issues about Europe and how harsh the reactions sometimes are. And yet, I think it is important that we speak about Europe as much as possible, and particularly now. Today, a few days away of the European elections, which might bring to the forefront new types of coalitions. So I think this debate and centered on the values, I think, is important. Now, when I've discussed with Charalambos about the title of this conference, in the beginning I wanted another title. I wanted to call it 2024 Year Zero or Year One of the European project. And I will always mention the word project because this is not something that's completed. It's something that's very much underway. And you heard Emmanuel Macron the other day in the speech in the Sorbonne when he spoke about this project can be mortal. I mean, it can actually disappear. And what is important, I think, is that we need to realize that for 80 years now, almost 80 years since the beginning of this process, we have been, in a way, privileged, but we have been, above all, protected. We have been protected because these were 80 years of peace, so we were protected at least against war. We were protected on the economic side because this was very much at the beginning an economic project, which started very much with the success of the Marshall Plan, and then continued with what we called the German economic miracle, Germany being a bit the engine of this process. And then we were protected also on the military side, of course, by the American umbrella, and particularly the American nuclear umbrella. And what is new, and I think this is what's happening now, is that these protections are evaporating or at high risk of evaporating. We have the war, we have a war in Europe, which might expand if Mr. Putin wins in the war in Ukraine. We have, on the economic side, we see a picture where the competition, I would say, on the economic side is much harsher, much stronger. Economy is more and more used as a political weapon by a number of countries, and we'll talk about that. And also we see that on the German side, the German engine is showing some signs of fatigue. And then we all know what might happen to us if a certain person becomes again president of the United States in the autumn. He was very blunt about that as well, about the future, let's say, of this cooperation, the future of NATO, and so on. So that's why I mentioned that we are, in a way, at the year one of this European process, because for the first time, we are alone. And for the first time, we need really to decide amongst ourselves what we want to do and where we want to go with this continent. And that is, I would say, the challenge that lies ahead of us. And we have a narrative to write. If we want to survive, let's say, in this changing world, and this narrative, we have to build it on the basis of the progress that we have made. We passed from the moment of economic communities to the moment of a European Union, and now we need a new step forward, whatever direction, whatever we call it, let's say. But we need to define a narrative that brings together a new range of issues, defense, of course. We need to be much stronger in narrowing and making our voice heard on the external side. It has to be quicker, it has to be more coordinated. I don't know if you read this morning an article in Politico, which was very critical about the lack of EU response in relation to what happened yesterday in Georgia, and saying, you know, we don't have the reaction yet, and so on. So this is something we have to deal with. This world is going quickly. We have to answer very quickly. And then we also, one of the issues that we also have to consider is what Macron calls the European industrial sovereignty. The COVID crisis showed very clearly that we are very dependent on a number of issues during the mass chaos in the beginning of the crisis. And this is something that's, that raises questions. Should we and can we recreate or repatriate real European industrial power? So these are some of the questions that you will have to consider in this narrative. And the question is, are we ambitious? Do we have the ambition to do that nowadays? And secondly, do we have the women and the men to design this, to write this narrative, and also to implement it and to carry it, above all, to the people? And I will come back to, I would say, the importance of the citizens afterwards. Now, we are entering a phase of the world which is much more unpredictable, much more potentially conflictual, and a world where a lot of people are feeling a feeling of fear. In fact, I would say that we have entered in the current months now what I would call the third phase of the post-war era. And the first phase, I remember that, lasted exactly 45 years, from 45 to 90. We had two superpowers. These superpowers had both their range of, their zone of influence, or the countries in their range of influence. These two superpowers were competing on all level, except one, which was direct military confrontation, because we know very well that at that moment, the nuclear weapons would get in one moment or another, and there was a risk of eradicating, I would say, or partially eradicating life. The consequences would have been dramatic. This is what we called the equilibrium of terror, or what we called also, in a nicer way, Pacific coexistence, peaceful coexistence. This was the moment of the time. And during the course, of course, a number of countries started to find this division not very comfortable, the movement of the non-aligned and so on. But the structure, at least, remained this confrontation between two superpowers. And then all of a sudden, one of these superpowers collapses. And you had this phase, and the beginning was very, I thought, always very imprudent words, saying that we assisted to, I would say, the eternal victory of one of the models, the Western, so-called Western liberal model. You remember the book by Francis Fukuyama, who called it the end of history. You never end history, and we are seeing it right now. So I think these type of wordings were rather imprudent. But this period was marked by two keywords. On the one hand, globalization, so globalization of the economy generally, and on the other hand, multilateralism. And multilateralism was a means to mitigate, or was a bit conceived, to mitigate the risks or the exaggerations of globalization. And you saw multilateralism in the form of various fora in the various areas. So in trade, it was the International Trade Organization. You had on the military side, the World Bank, the European Monetary Fund. On the political side, you had the United Nations, and particularly the Security Council, and also, I would say, the various regional fora where this world order was created and maintained. You had the G7, you had the G20, all of this relates, I would say, to this global picture. And then all of a sudden, what do we see? A few years ago, coincided more or less with the COVID, this model starts to disintegrate in turn. And what's interesting to see is that just as much as the first model collapsed in a few months, now we see that multilateralism in particular is collapsing all over the place. And in the place, we are finding ourselves with this world, which in a way resembles a bit the first post-war time with the appearance or the strengthening, not only appearance, but strengthening of a number of, I would say, very actors, superpowers, we could call them. Very strong change in rhetoric, much more offensive rhetoric, and we see it in all areas, including also, as I said, on the economic side, but we see it on the military field, we see it particularly also on the political side. And this is the world where, in a way or another, the European Union and Europe in general has to define what role it wants to play. Now, and this world will be dominated, in a way, by a very, I would say, limited number of powerful actors. The difference with the first period, which makes it in a way also more complicated, is instead of having two superpowers, you have a few more. And that's where the global actors, and that's where the difficulties will lie ahead of us. Now, who are these actors? Well, to define who these actors are, I will take three boxes. The first box is the political box. The political box is the capacity for a country to expand its zone of influence outside of its borders. So, like in the first period, to have a group of countries which constitute your zone of influence. And then you have the military box and you have the economic box, not surprisingly. Now, two countries, in my view, tick the three boxes, the United States and China. And that way, it resembles a bit the situation that we had before, competing harshly in more or less all levels, sometimes more with a more mild rhetoric, sometimes in a much more harsh manner. And it's this traditional fight that we have had, let's say, since about 2,500 years in Greece, between Athens and Sparta, this eternal struggle to become the leading power of the world. China finds that this is the moment for it to take the torch of the leading nation, and the United States wants by all means to maintain its leadership. And symbolically, this has always been quite important, and it's very important, as you can see from the reactions and so on, in, I would say, in the reactions by these two countries. Then you have Russia. So for Russia, I tick undoubtedly the political box. Russia has been extremely active, using all kinds of methods to ascertain its position, its political position in the world. We've seen it very active of course, in the Middle East, on the occasion of the war in Syria, the civil war in Syria. We've seen it very active in Africa, where it has been able, particularly in Central Africa and the Sahel, to oust out of Africa the Europeans, which was our traditional, I would say, zone of influence, if you can call, if we had one, and also, of course, its attitude and its action in nearly all of the former countries of the former Soviet Union. And we see in the way it uses, and not hesitating to use sometimes, I would say, the military force, or provoking, I would say, disruptions within countries we see in the Caucasus and in Moldova. So for Russia, I tick the political box. I would tick also the military box, although in the beginning of the war in Ukraine, many people all of a sudden had doubts about the capacity of Russia to renew its armed forces. There were maybe some hesitations at the beginning, but after the first months of the war, it started very strongly in recreating its army, in modernizing its army, transforming its economy in a war economy. So I take the military box. And I put a question mark on the economy. It was traditionally Russia's weak point, let's say. And although it shows some resilience in regards, I would say, the efficiency of the Western sanctions, we see that on the whole, the Russian economy as such, is suffering or will be suffering in the months to come. And then you have a group of actors which I will call the Global South. It's a group of countries that's led by, undeniably, India, and the group's countries like regional entities, Turkey, Iran, South Africa, possibly Brazil. But Mr. Lula shows a bit of carefulness in approaching this issue, and particularly of not offending too much the Northern American neighbor. This group is marked and kept along by one issue, which is a very strong anti-Western stance, anti-Western rhetoric. And in there you have undoubtedly India, that believes this is our moment. It's our moment to get also our zone of influence, so quite active also on establishing or defining what its zone of influence could be. But that's where the problems come, because in doing so, and India is very committed to do so, it will very often find that that's fighting for the same zone of influence as China, and to a lesser extent, in fact, also the influences in Central Asia by Russia. So there's going to be a lot of uncertainty, of course, in that part of the world, in Central and Eastern Asia in the years to come, or the decades to come, and with also, I would say, all of these entities combating for influence in the Southeastern Asian peninsula in particular. And we already see China moving in, threatening places in the Philippines. You see, independently, of course, of Taiwan. So for these countries, which is interesting, which I would call the Global South, you see that China and Russia want absolutely to be part of this group, and India absolutely doesn't want them to interfere in what they consider is their area, their group of countries, which resembles a bit in their stance the group of the non-aligned from the first period. And then you have the European Union. Well, for the European Union, I tick undoubtedly the economic box. because also I said there's maybe a bit of fatigue in the German engine, and but we have still, I mean, we show quite a lot of resilience as far as the strength of our economy, particularly due to the strength of our commercial treaties, which we were, I mean, we have been conducting since a long time. For Europe, I don't tick the military box, because although we have to get our act together on the defense side, this defense will be defensive. I mean, there is no ambition for the European Union to become an offensive power like the others, and we'll talk about that also in a minute. And then the question mark, I put a question mark on the political box, and that's exactly what the scope and the ambition and the nature of this narrative that we have to write. That's where we will see if we can tick this box or not. When I say how important it is also to define, I would say, this new narrative, and particularly to apply it and to present it, I would say also to the world powers and to the people of the world, it's particularly important because, contrary to the second phase, which was very much marked by, I would say, the sense of cooperation and abilities to work together, this phase is very much going to see the strength of, it's all about showing the strength of these new powers. I mean, there's a lot of testosterone going on the sort of rhetoric that's going on, and this is not something that we like to do in Europe. And nevertheless, I would say if we want to be recognized as, I would say, a leading power in the world, we have to address this, and we have to do it in some way or another. Now, how do you do this? How do these various actors get their message through? And it's interesting because all of them, wherever they are, if they are dictatorships, if they are democracies or whatsoever, in order to, I would say, ascertain their role and their ambition to be one of these actors, all of these actors have to, in a way, convince both inside and outside. And both inside, I said, even if these are not dictatorships, but you have, if they are dictatorships, because you need, in one way or another, to justify what you're doing and to justify why your country eventually will be at war at some stage or another. Now, for Russia and for China, the rhetoric or the strategy is the same. And you see it very, very strongly. That is the memory of their great past, the military past, recuperating, reforming the empire. It's very much also the sort of strategy used by some of the regional powers that I mentioned, which are incidentally also former empires. So you glorify your past by creating, I would say, and trying to create a nationalistic movement around you. This is, I would say, this is valid both inside and outside. Now, the United States don't have this great military past. And they don't have any particular territorial claims either. The others have. The United States don't have any territorial claims. So how do the Americans get their message through? By doing what they do best, public relations, the PR and so on, and communication. What means hammering your slogan, America first, make America great again, putting your flag on every American house, glorifying, I would say, the nation whenever you can, playing the national anthem in every morning, raising the flag in every school. This is, I would say, the way that by hammering these type of messages and so on, and symbols, this is how the United States are trying to, in a way, keep the movement. It works, because if you talk to Americans nowadays, nobody doubts about, I would say, the power and the strength of the United States, although, as we know, it is also at the same time, and more, a very divided country. Now, Europe. We don't have any territorial claims. We have a great past, but this past was through conflicting empires, which are now members of the United States, so no glorification of that. We have a flag, but I wonder how many people in the room have or possess an American flag. Or how many of the people in the room are European? What did they say? Oh, no, a European flag. How many of the people hang this flag up, for instance, on the 9th of May? I do. Do many others? We will see. We have an anthem, but I would say a majority of the Europeans don't even know what the European anthem is about. We have a slogan, united in diversity. I think even fewer Europeans know about that. So we have to do it in a different way. And that's where the values come in. I say this because this is, in my way, the instrument, the way where we can play a role in the world that's coming. It will be a different role than the three, I would say, superpowers, and eventually India, if one day I upgrade it to, I would say, a global actor. We cannot use, I would say, the same type of rhetoric. We don't have that ambition. But we have what you call our values. The United States has, in its constitution, the reference to democracy. But we saw what the president of the United States did to the symbol of American democracy. And as I said, being also, I'm Belgian and American, I see in the country these elements that my fellow Americans are so proud of. I see this, and particularly the reference to democracy disappearing. In Europe, we have in our founding treaties references to democracy, equality, freedom, human rights, and the rule of law. And independently of that, references to peace and references to solidarity. And that is, I think, where we have to build, I would say, our narrative to continue to play this role in the world. I see two roles mainly by using this, independently also of our economic strength. But I mean, on the political scene, I see two roles for Europe in the future. The one is to continue to be a reference for the people of the world. Now, these values that I mentioned is something that represents, in a way, the legacy of Europeans to the world, starting with democracy 2,000 years ago in this very city. This is something we have fought for, and this is something we have tried to preserve, to nurture throughout the centuries, and this constitutes what we could call, that's the portfolio of Margaritis Schiras in the current commission. This represents our European model. Now, I said that it's going to be difficult. It would be very difficult to use this model for the moment in trying to keep up, I would say, relations with a lot of countries in the world, because we have done it sometimes also in a way that was perceived as arrogance or something particularly in Africa. And believe me, of course, the Russians and to a lesser extent the Chinese found exactly the way to countervene, I would say, our presence by precisely pointing to the fact that we were giving lessons to our former colonies and this type of thing. So we will have to find a way to address in the future also, I would say, the way we address some of the leaders in the world who have been worked on, I would say, by some of the other competitors. Nevertheless, in these countries, that's why I make a difference between maybe the leaders of these countries and the population of the countries. There are lots of people that believe in these values. They don't benefit from any of these values, and that see Europe still as, I would say, the continent that represents them. And we have the current situation, because if we play it well, is something also. Those leaders are not there forever. I mean, there is a way, and there must be a way also, where we can, I would say, go and reshape our relationship with Africa in particular, being a bit more subtle than we sometimes have been in the past. But this notion of Europe as, I would say, still the bastion of these values is something that's very important. And the second role, that's in a way linked to that, I think we can be, if we believe in ourselves and if we get organized, I would say the honest broker in the world to come, meaning the diplomats of the world to come, the mitigators of conflict, the one that can put people together and prevent conflicts and prevent wars. And there again, I think it's very important if we stick to our model, if we stick to our model, that we can, this would give us, if we want to do so, I would say the ability, I would say to play a different role than the three others, but to still, I would say, be perceived as a global actor on the world scene. And I would say with positive, these positive values that I mentioned. Now, in order to do so, and I will end by that, we in Europe need to do two things. On the one hand, we need to stay together. And on the other hand, we need to get the people back. I just want to explain that and then to end. Remain together. A lot of people seem, when you talk to them, very pessimistic about the ability of the countries of the European Union to cooperate. I don't think this is entirely true. I think, I mean, we have our differences and so on. But we showed on three occasions, on the occasion of three crises in the last 5 years, that when you want to do things together, we can get our act together. The first was climate change and the environmental crisis. And we were able to come up, quite unexpectedly, frankly, with, I would say, the most ambitious plan to date regarding how to tackle the effects of climate change. Of course, this plan, the European Green Deal, has been adapted and so on, because we have also conflicting interests in our own countries. But this will was there, and I think we have to continue to support it, because this is a way also for Europe to show to the other countries in the world that we care about a global issue. The second moment was COVID. We moved from environment to health. During the COVID, two things happened. The first was, and that was totally unexpected, after the chaos of the mask episode, which was total chaos, the member states, by their own decision, decided to charge the European Commission to draft a plan for the vaccines, not only to draft a plan, but to implement the plan, and also to go and negotiate for this with the pharmaceutical firms, which is something that the Commission had done, because health is not really one of the issues that come into, I would say, the global competences of the Union. And then there was another thing that happened at that moment. It also commissioned the Commission to develop ambitious recovery plans by allowing it to act by itself on the markets, eventually by borrowing money and so on. This is something that was totally unheard of 10 years ago. So this was, in a way, a strong leap forward in an area and at a moment where we didn't expect it. But it shows again that faced with, I would say, a crisis situation, we're able to stick together and to find and to be creative and innovative. And the third, of course, is on the political side. At the moment of the war in Ukraine, where not only, and this was something I think that Putin totally found unexpected, there was a total surprise for him, that not only the European Union stick together, but remained, I mean, the situation remains globally until now. So these are signs, I would say, that show that when we want to do things, and if there is the will, and if we find the people to do it, we will be able to draft this our narrative and shape our own. But for that, we need also the people on board. That's something that I have been concerned about since the very beginning of my career, particularly in the Commission. And sometimes a message that was difficult to pass. I strongly believe that this project will not survive, and you can't develop it against the citizens, or without the citizens, and all the more so against the citizens. This situation of drifting away started. I was looking when I wrote this book about letters to Jean Monnet, into why this happened. And I think that in the heads of the founding fathers in the beginning, communicating with the citizens was not necessary, in the sense that their focus was essentially on the economic scene. The economy was doing well. It was the period of Les 30 Glorieuses in France, so these 30 years of... and so, I mean, I think there was really a perception that, you know, we didn't have to approach significantly the people. The situation started to change when the first economic crisis came in the year 70 was the oil crisis, when people drifting away. And we clearly had, and for me, it was one of the strongest failures that we had, and not addressing this issue and not anticipating this issue, that we will need the citizens to, in one way or another, to implement and to develop this project. And there was, of course, a second factor, which is, and was very much in the fault of the member states, which took the habit of, since 20 years, of blaming Europe, as they say, for every single thing that went wrong in their own country. It's very easy to do so because the European Union, the Commission, was not answering to that. But doing that, hammering that ad nauseam for 20 years, then you don't have to be surprised that now, for instance, this particular moment, when you question the people, and they say, you know, 20 or 25% of the people say that they support the union, as I read last week in France. It's not surprising that you see also the return of the populist and the extreme parties. We are paying now for the mistakes that the member states sort of structured and organized, because this was happening all the time at all levels of power, and this was very worrying. To recuperate the citizens, we have to find new ways and introduce, I would say, a form of hope and a form of, I would say, dream. Jacques Delors had a very interesting formula, because he said you can't fall in love with a market, an economic market or a market space. He was very right. If you are developing a project like this one, just like, I would say, what happened in the very first phases of the development of the American dream, so of something that was comparable in the forms and in the type of actors, we need to reinstill a form of hope, and you do that by two things: by developing, I would say, perspectives, by developing a vision, relating it to the people. And secondly, you have to bring the people together by developing the possibilities for them to know what Europe is about. So that's the area where I'm working for the moment, in the area of culture and heritage, because culture and heritage in one way are the visible side of the values I was talking about, the tangible side, the legacy of democracy, the legacy of the fight for freedom through the revolutions and so on. These periods of artistic developments were all linked in one way or another to the values. And at the moment where a lot of citizens want to get involved in one way or another in society, the COVID brought, I would say, two keywords in my view to the forefront, which we should pay attention to. The one is well-being, and the second is social inclusion, the word in community. And we find that this is what I'm working on very strongly for the moment, is to find ways to tell people that culture and heritage work in both ways. On the one hand, you learn, because this is the passive way. You see what's happening, you visit and so on. And on the second hand, by volunteering, etc., you can do a lot of work. in all of our countries, and we are trying to do so in a little island of Nostra, getting people together to save the landscapes, to save the spirit of our places and of our heritage and so on. That's what I was going to say. And I'll end up by quoting an article that I was yesterday in Delos in a project, interesting, linking space, philosophy, Europe, very interesting context. And someone sent me this morning an article by the European editor of The Guardian saying, in Europe, people are scared. And scared about this, scared about the future, scared about Russia, scared about Trump, scared about this and that. She used in an article, small article, 27 times the word fear. But she didn't propose the slightest solution to overcome the fear. So I thought that the article was a bit short, as she would need a second part. And yet, at the same time, during the conference yesterday, at the end, somebody got up and said, it is time to transform the narrative of fear, so by coincidence, you used the word, into a narrative of hope. And I think this is what we are lacking the most in Europe for the moment. We do not believe enough in ourselves, and we do not believe enough in what we are doing. And this is something we will have to address itself. I will just give you one example in relation to show also that sometimes we are stronger than we think. Just one thing that we seem to say is that we have declining population in Europe, but yet, I don't know how many people know that if we represent in the Union, if we had maybe either the UK, which in a way will, I think, move in when we try to move a bit back, and or if you bring in the potential candidate countries in the Western Balkans and so on, we represent in terms of population the United States and Russia combined. This is about 500, almost 500 million people. So we represent half of a billion people. And I think this is also, in one way, one of the reasons that we sometimes should believe. So I count on you on also believing a bit more and spreading this word that we can, on some points, be proud also of what we are and what we can do together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jimmy, for this comprehensive, if I might say, lecture about the European Union, the fears, and what is happening in the contemporary world. You described, I think, with details of what is happening today in the world, the collapse of the Soviet Union, and what we have the emergence of the global South, and of course of China, and the competition between the United States and China. So this was your first part of your speech, was, I think, a detailed analysis of what is going on. Your second part was about the European Union and how fits in all these changes which are happening now, what will be the role of the European Union. You gave emphasis of, first of all, of the ability of the European Union, that the experience of the last years was not so negative. So on that point was, you argue that we are not unable to deal with crisis, first of all. I think this is a first outcome of your speech. And the other thing is that also I think you pay attention about the cultural heritage. In other words, the values of the European Union which still exist. And I think this is a matter which we could discuss, how Europe could overcome this crisis by having these principles, which of course is global principles, if I might say so. although some people have a different opinion on that. And there are some recent books which doubt about the universality of the Western values. On the other hand, you pay attention to the participation of the people, and you think that having the people aboard is a sine qua non in order Europe achieves something. And your last point, I think, was about how we could overcome fear. And that's true that in Europe, but also, not also in Europe, but also in the United States and in other parts of the world, there are many fears: economic, political, military, climate change. All these are fears which make the people sometimes be passive. The only questions which I have, and perhaps you didn't elaborate it enough, I think, is that how Europe is possible as a power to deal with all these conflicts and turbulences in the world. Should its efforts concentrate on becoming a superpower again? And in other words, a power which will have military might in the context of realpolitik, should sacrifice sometimes its principles in order to achieve stability, especially in its neighborhoods. For example, it is better to have in Egypt a dictatorship rather than to promote civil rights and protection of its citizens in Egypt, or we should follow a realpolitik. And third, but not last, you know about the discussion which is going on about changing the decision-making and the institution, and of reforming the treaty. Especially in the field of foreign policy, there are many people, but of course the federalists are in favor of that, about getting rid of veto in foreign policy issues. Others have a different opinion. I think this is very hot matters of which we could discuss, if you like, later on. But I think your analysis was, on the other hand, very realistic, and you described the crisis which exists very accurate. So I would like to open the floor now, except if you want to respond to these points, or maybe I will let you later on. Is somebody who could make a comment or even a question?
Can I maybe answer just some of the points you just mentioned, yes, before, and then we will open up, because I think it's important.
Why not?
There is the issue of the issue of, do we want to be a superpower? No, I don't think we have that type of ambition, because superpower means also, I would say, and particularly on the military side, etc., to be able to run offensive campaigns and this type of thing. Our ambition, I think, is to be a global actor, which does not necessarily mean to become a superpower in the sense that we usually use this word. Should we? And then you mentioned also the principles. Should we sacrifice our principles? I think we have to be strong on our principles, outside and also inside. And sometimes we have to be very strong and maybe stronger also inside about these principles. If we want to pretend that we have a model, we have to start by applying this model inside. And we have to be very careful about that. Now, we are not entirely naive. I mean, we have an external policy. We have some excellent diplomats who do that, and we apply realpolitik also, of course, in addressing situations. You mentioned Egypt, there are a lot of other situations. That does not mean that we have to, for that, give up, I would say, our model or our principles, but you have to, of course, if you want to reach a goal, and in this case, I mean, I didn't mention, of course, the migration crisis, which was also where we were able at the end, but this is very complicated, and there the countries had very conflicting views to come up with, I would say, a plan, etc., which is far from perfect, but you will have to improve it. But what I mean is, in its attitude towards countries, the EU applies, of course, is very realistic in dealing with the situations. One element, and we would be naive if we did. I mean, I give you one example. In this in enlargement, my Secretary General of Europa Nostra is from Serbia. She's in the opposition, and she gets absolutely furious whenever she sees that somebody from that Vučić goes to Paris or Vučić goes to, I mean, you have to deal, I'm explaining her that this is a long-term situation, and you have to, you have to sometimes, in order to achieve a goal, you have to also speak with different people, and then you can, force. Diplomacy is, of course, something, a long-term, if you want to have results, it's something you have to see in a long-term perspective. What I did say, though, is that we have to improve, and on, I would say, on the reactivity, sometimes on the external relations, because there we are looked directly into the face, and the fact that we didn't speak up yesterday on the Georgia case, for instance, is a very good example, even by delaying it a bit, but we were named and shamed by a lot of diplomats, a lot of countries, a lot of media. So this is something, certainly an area where we can improve. Basically, that's what I wanted to mention at this stage. But it would be interesting to have questions from the floor.
Yes. I'll collect some questions and you could
okay.
Answer. Please.
There's a microphone.
I'm coming. Right, thank you. Ioanna Nasasopoulou, I know Jimmy from my years in Bruges in the College of Europe, so I'm very proud that you are here with us and very pleased that we managed to come today. Of course, we all believe in the European values, and of course it's very important. That's what we learned always, and we believe in our values. That's the main point. I think everybody will agree that yes, values are important for Europe, and Europe is the only, let's say, continent that really believes in values, and we want these values, and we want to excel according to our values. But on the other hand, we have Ukraine, and the war is ante portas, as one can say. So values, of course, is a road which we have adopted, and the values we have adopted many years, and perhaps we didn't do a great job. But I think it's a long, let's say, term work that we have to do with regard to values. The war is here, is in Europe, and we need to face the war. So my question is, do you think that only with values we can face the war in Ukraine? Don't you believe that, I mean, Macron was very pessimistic about Europe and the situation in Ukraine, and I think he believes very much into the, let's say, trying to create a military force, that Europe needs to be a military force. So what are your thoughts about that?
So collect another question. Yes, identify yourself, please.
My name is Thrasis Marketos from the University of Pελoponνήσου. I would like to ask what happened to the famous von der Leyen geopolitical Europe? We don't see it nowadays.
Okay.
Can I answer?
No, we shall collect
some more
later on. A second round, please.
Okay.
Respond now.
Now, to answer Ioanna, and I said this, I think, quite clearly, it's not because we have values that we have to be naive. On the contrary, it's the values that can make us stronger. And I did, of course, in face of the situation in Ukraine, mention immediately that we have to get our act together on the defense side. We took a number of initiatives. We will most probably in the next commission have a commissioner for defense. That's why, I mean, it does not prevent us to have our values, but of course we have to have a very realistic attitude. We can promote values, but in the case of war and people that don't respect them, we have to take the consequences and do the consequences that we need, first of all, to protect ourselves. And we have gone a long way into that during the past months, and we learned a lot from Ukraine. Not only from the war in Ukraine, not only on the situation of war and the situation of defense, but of course, Germany, I think, learned a lot about, and Europe, about this whole issue of overdependence and so on. You mentioned Macron and his comment about sending troops there, because actually, when you deal with these leaders, Macron understood very well, and he was saying it since the beginning, that if he tried, it was interesting to see how he evolved. In the beginning, absolutely trying to phone in the first days Putin every 5 minutes, and saw that it didn't succeed. Then realized that, you know, talking to somebody like that, you have to use, I would say, strength or threat. I mean, that power game is the only thing that he will understand. And that's why he mentioned several times that we'd send the idea of sending troops. I don't think there's any question of sending troops, at least at this moment in Ukraine. But sometimes you have to send these type of messages, you know, strong messages. And I said, if we want to be respected, we have to also defend ourselves. So I totally reassure you on the way that disconnecting totally, I would say, the strength of our values and I would say a sort of naivety and naiveness in relating, I would say, to a war situation in particular. That would be, of course, totally useless. And I think in that way we are a bit stronger than that. As regards the geopolitical Europe, it's true that I didn't hear very much about that. And yet, I would say the whole issue, what we are talking about today, is only geopolitical. So I think she will get back to, and she'll have to get back to this geopolitical situation. When I was mentioning Europe being, I would say, the sort of honest broker and diplomat and exerting, I would say, this power, it's very much, I would say, this is what I meant by giving it or providing us with a geopolitical role, which you can buy with, I would say, it's messages that you can deliver to the people of the world. It's very interesting, you see, when I was talking about attractiveness, that, of course, when you see people in the world with dramatic situations and the migration flows, I mean, these people come where they find attractiveness. And in Latin America, they will go, or they still believe they can go to the United States. And for Europe, I mean, this is, I know a lot of people, I mean, resent this and find this fearful and so on. But at the same time, it shows also that people do consider, do consider still Europe as an attractive region of the world. Other questions?
Other question, please? Yes.
So I would like first to thank you very much, Jimmy, for this inspired and positive speech. This is really something that gave us fresh air a few weeks before the next election. And you focus your presentation to the role of the citizens. The European citizens, their participation. We have also the experience of the Conference on the Future of Europe, where the citizens, for the first time, express their views, what they would like to have for the future of the European Union. So we know now, we have the list of recommendations, what the citizens would like to do for the next period. But you mentioned also how the Americans succeed to create this citizenship, the strong citizenship, to be Americans. I think we have to see how we can promote the European citizenship, what kind of message we can pass for the new generation. And if you see with the reinforcement of the European citizenship, a way to bypass all this, well, I will say very sensitive discussion about veto. Because if the citizens, they know each other, they understood the challenges, and they are common challenges for all citizens, all European citizens, there is no need to discuss for veto. So I would like to have your views about this, how we can improve for the young generation, how we can promote European citizens, and if the promotion of European citizens, it's a way to bypass also sensitive issues for the next period, like veto.
Okay. If there is any other question? Yes, please. Microphone.
I'm Spiridon Kogas. I'm a member of UF Greece, and of course it's an honor for me to be together here. Also, I'm a member of cultural heritage sector, running and participating in a European consortium about the European heritage and a non-profit organization, brand new. So I would like just to share at the same time to ask you, because of your role too in Europa Nostra, we participate also in Europa Nostra, about the importance of how to form the European identity. Because through our experience from the cultural heritage sector, the last year we have a positive movement, especially from European youth, with an interest about how to involve and engage in a new European citizenship around the protection of common heritage, but we do not have the tools, we do not have the necessary institutional support from the European cultural mechanisms in order to promote and forward projects that directly speaking about the common European identity and are not assumed of different national narratives. And I'm sharing this with you, Mr. Jamar, because many times that we have already submitted proposals and projects that directly focus on the European, common European roots and the dynamic of the common European heritage, we are rejected. And we do not find any support. Thanks a lot, and it's an honor again.
There is any other question?
And
If there is not, I would like to make a point here. There is not, of course, the people are a very important factor for strengthening Europe. On the other hand, another factor is political leadership. And many analysts say and pointing out that there is a lack of political leadership in Europe today. One example is very clear about migration. On the one hand, we need workforce from other countries because, of course, there is a demographic decline. And the European Commission, I think, in one of its studies, pointed out that about 20 million people need in the forthcoming years as a workforce. On the other hand, you see what is going on with migration, and many populist parties argue and gain votes because are in favor of having restrictions on migration. And the political leaders, you see, have not a clear-cut policy on this issue, I think. And if you like, and about the reform of the institutions and the revision of the treaty, if you like to comment on that.
Okay, I will take the three questions. On the issue of reinforcing, how to reinforce the European citizenship. It's not going to be easy. And you made reference to the United States. When the United States were created, you had, since the beginning, I would say very much this hammering about creating a new nation together and involving directly the people, and this was aimed at the citizens of the United States. So this is something we didn't do, as I said, in Europe. First of all, because we are not in the United States. Secondly, because the situation is you have, I would say, this project that goes in parallel to the existence, subsistence of 27 nation states, independent countries. So it's always, I would say, in a way, more complicated in this area. One thing that we won't be able to do easily is to convince people that are no longer convinced or that are very antagonistic towards the very existence of the European Union. I mentioned the role, the damage caused by the member states in hammering in this and destroying, I would say, and blaming the EU for everything. You could add for there also, I would say, the attitude very often of the media, who never speak or very rarely speak of the union in a positive way. And if you pay attention, I mean, this is something that you very often see. So you have to find other ways, and that's how you try to create. That's why I get to the question of the common identity. I don't like the word identity. I only have fights with my Serbian Secretary General, because identity for me is one of the words used by the extreme parties or the populist party to claim, I would say, the return to their national identity. I much prefer the word common consciousness, which is about the same thing. It's more positive, I think, in also the type of reactions that we have. How do you do that? I said by multiplying, in a way. One of the ways is by multiplying the ways in which Europeans can learn about each other and learn to know about it, learn to work with. We had, of course, the big success of Erasmus, the Erasmus program, but Erasmus is limited to basically university, and not everybody goes to university, and or almost everybody, but I mean, not everybody has the possibility to benefit from an Erasmus program still now. You mentioned the Conference on the Future of Europe. I'll give you an anecdote, because it was very interesting. I participated in one of the sessions in Dublin where a group of 30 citizens were assembled, and they worked a whole weekend, and they had to produce 2 recommendations. And I thought, when you get people, they're going to go into drinking Guinness after 2 hours, half of them will disappear. Not at all. They took this role very seriously, and I was very comforted by that. As if you give them a responsibility to do so, they do it, and they were very, very committed to do it. And one idea that came out was a Belgian lady that all of a sudden said, yes, we have Erasmus, but now we have to find a way to provide, to enable every European citizen to have at least one time in his or her life the opportunity to experience, I would say, one of the other member states, not just by traveling, but also by experience or work experience. And I found this idea very interesting. It's one of the ideas that actually ended it went through the whole process, and it ended as one of the recommendations. So I was happy to see the birth of that recommendation, because it goes very much in the sign that we do. To what's your name? Spiridon. To Spiridon, I would like to say that we have a common fight here, because when I was in, it's very funny. I can say this, I think. When I was with my friends in the commission, and when I was working a lot on trying to work on communication and communicating Europe, I was talking to some of my friends that were in these higher positions, and I was saying, but you don't forget the citizens, and don't forget, and you have to find ways to, you know, to get to them and so on. They were saying, yes, yes, Jimmy, okay, let me, yeah, we are doing the serious stuff here. But actually, we have now a vice president dealing with the promotion of the European model. It's very interesting to having discussed the past years with Margaritis and to see how actually he got into this subject and discovering also the importance of this human dimension. And a project like this, when I was talking about reinstilling an element of dream or instilling an element of being together, of common sharing something, of consciousness, there are various ways of doing it. But also this encouragement has to come on the way of the institutions. And you have an ally towards the institutions in the Creative Europe programs and these other programs to enhance, I would say, this dimension of we are working a lot in Europa Nostra to define how we can better do this. That's what I wanted to. So it's going to be difficult because we have lost people and people are against it. But we should not stop there, of course, and we have a job to do. And we have a job to do with the next parliament and the next commission. And then the last question, lack of political leadership on migration. Okay, but I agree on the lack of political leadership for the moment. We don't have the best, all in all, if you take the whole spectrum. But yet, that's what surprised me in a positive way, and that's why I remain cautiously optimistic that even in this situation, which I agree with, we are still able to, I would say, develop, these common positions when it comes to important recession essential issues. The migration issue, we came to a plan that was finally agreed by everybody. But it's, of course, very difficult because member states not only, there's a huge difference between the Wirtschaftendas of Angela Merkel in the time, and I would say also the reaction of a number of countries, and particularly in Central and Eastern Europe, who are scared to death about the idea of having migrants come in and who are fueled in that sense by their public opinion. So we talk about a political leadership, but of course you have, I would say, the public opinions at the back, which can be with very harsh positions on a number of issues. Migration was certainly one of them. But this is not, and the story is never ended, because as you said very well, there are the two issues here. A number of countries need migrants, need migrant populations. And there are, how many jobs are not fulfilled because of this lack and because of this distrust? And on the other hand, you have to take care of this overcome in a way these fears again around concerning, I would say, the fear of the other, particularly if the other is not a European.
Okay, we could stop here. I would like to congratulate.
Yes, another question.
But we have no time.
Okay, one quick question.
Okay, my name is Sofia Gardelli. One moment. Thank you very much. My name is Sofia Gardelli, and unfortunately English is my fourth language, but I will try as you want to speak English.
The three others must be perfect. Your English
no. Okay, it's not a question, it's an opinion. Because finally, to
to create this common, as you said, consciousness, we must meet the others. And to meet the others, we must study and work together. So we could, in Greece or in Belgium that happens sometimes because you have 2 languages, etc., or even 3. But in Greece, we would create a kind of European schools. I don't speak for the European schools we have in Brussels and Luxembourg with 5 sections, etc. But the European school in Bergen, let's say, work with 2.5 sections. In fact, they work with Dutch, English, and some French.
Which is a question, please?
Yes. You don't want my question.
You have not put a question. This is a point. It's possible to make the question.
But I think that what we are looking here, it's also for proposal. It's to find solutions, no? Okay, anyway.
You're right.
Okay, anyway, what I mean is, if we could, in the Greek schools or the schools of other countries, introduce teachers from other language, not Greek who speak English, we introduce also the culture. And this is possible because there are possibilities. We are smaller than United States and Russia, but our culture influences the others. I worked for 1 year in China because they wanted to create European schools in China. And of course, I worked for the European schools in Brussels, etc. This is a way to go on, because it's not only Erasmus.
Is very clear.
Is Socrates.
Excuse me. Your point is very clear. Okay, I let you ask questions, and you started to make a speech.
No, but...
so, please, if you like to respond very briefly.
No. I like your comment, and this is a way, of course. If you touch on education, you're going to, you have to have the agreement administer. We're talking a bit of opportunities here, which can be perfectly, when you're talking about bringing people together and starting, with the young people and starting in schools, and changing and bringing the spirit of this common consciousness and so on. That's where it has to start. So there are different ways to do it. I don't know if creating a so-called European schools or bringing in the teachers, that depends also something for I would say that we can bring up one day to the ministers of education and this kind of thing. The whole idea is to have Europeans learn from each other. And this is what your proposal is a very interesting proposal. I know that Spiridon is trying to make, and we will try to help him in pushing it. I just want to maybe make a final little comment. I think they're going to be, this is one thing that you said, that we are on the values, that we are looking into, we are attached to our values. Joanna said, we are attached to the values, but maybe not all the other countries are. And I believe that one of the big debates in the next decade, outside of the geopolitical side, will be on democracy. Is democracy still going to be a key issue in Europe and in the world? In Europe, probably yes, but also in the world. And part of the attractiveness, if we are strong on our attractiveness and our model for, I would say, not only the people, but in this case, I mean the countries of the world, will be our ability to stick to the basic of these principles, which is democracy. And it's true that in a lot of countries, people are living in a system where they abide to, China being an example, they abide to the existing. But when people, claim that we don't have freedom to sort of speech and then they can this and that, I mean, in which continent where do people want to live, actually? In which country do we people want to live? And that's also something that we must ask ourselves. So democracy is going to be one of the issues, I would say, that's going to come up very strongly. And the other issue that's more internally, which will be on the agenda, we don't talk about that, will be, of course, enlargement. That will be for the European. And we can see signs where von der Leyen will be pushing, I would say, very strongly, through the influence also, because of the influence of these outside countries, to press, I would say, enlargement as quickly as possible, at least for the Western Balkans.
I would like at this moment to thank Jamar for accepting our invitation, and we are very happy that we have here and we discuss all these interesting things few weeks before the European Parliament elections.
Go and vote.
Okay. Thank you very much, all of you.